I'm going to hit record before I forget. Okay, so this is a workshop presented by Jessica Cox, one of our students. What's the title again? Crisis
Text Hotline.
Crisis Text Hotline. All right, take it away, Jessica.
Okay, volunteer opportunities. Okie dokie. Hi, everybody. Glad to see you all. So I'm in the Master's in Counseling program, and I'm due to graduate in 2024. Hopefully, God willing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So for the last let me just okay. So I guess for almost the last 2 years now, I have been volunteering on Crisis Text Hotline as a crisis counselor. And the reason I started it was, I guess at first, because I really wanted to just make sure that I actually wanted to be a counselor, quite frankly, because I was like, I'm going to grad school, and what if I and I didn't have any experience working with clients per se. And I was like, what if I graduate and I'm like, I don't really actually want to do this, or I'm not very good at it. So I thought, let me, and a friend of mine was a crisis counselor on the text hotline. So I thought, well, let me check it out. So that was, almost 2 years ago, and 350 people ago that I've actually worked with on the hotline. And I can't say enough great things about it. It was a little scary at first because it's a text-based platform, and it's very sophisticated, and they give you training and everything. But I'll never forget, like, when I had to go live for the first time, how frightening it was to actually have people. There's a queue of folks, and you click on this, take the next texter, and like hitting that take the next texter button for the first time was really scary, because it was just, game on. And but you're supervised the entire time, so you're not alone. You're supervised, you have your coach, you have a success coach. They're there to make sure that that you're able to perform at a very high level, but also to make sure, they're protecting the texters, the people that are coming to get help from you as well. So with all that said, I'm just going to fly through this presentation that they created for me. Yes, Sean?
So like when you are texting back and forth, does the supervisor, they're watching the texts?
They're pretty much watching you, yeah. Especially at the beginning. Now that I'm like level 6, and I've helped over 350 people, I don't feel like they're watching my every move now, but they definitely were in the beginning. Because if I would go off script, and I'll talk about this more, like there was a couple times, one of the things I learned not to do on the platform was give advice or to go off script, or there's certain, in the training, they'll tell you you learn about ethics, and the platform has protocols and ethics, and there are certain things you're not there to do. You're not there to be a counselor. It's a short-term service. So there's been 1 or 2 times when I've maybe gone off script, and they're like right there and saying, well, you really shouldn't have done that type thing. And I'm like, and so you kind of learn how to take supervision as well, and which wasn't easy at first, but yeah, you're watched very much so in the beginning, especially, which is good, because you're working in life or death situations with these people that are coming on. So I never feel like I'm alone, and yeah, it's actually it's good to know that there's someone there who's watching. Anyway,
Jessica, I have a quick question before you go any further.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this exclusively a text hotline, or do you also take phone calls or anything else?
No, it's actually text-based, and I'll show you the platform at the end of the presentation, but it's so you sign in to they give you a password, and they give you there's a portal that as a counselor you sign into, and you can schedule your shifts, and there's training, updates, and fact sheets and all sorts of things. So you sign into the platform through there, and then you come onto this very sophisticated screen that on the left side has a chat box with other counselors and supervisors. And whenever I start my shift, I let my supervisor know that I'm there. So I say, hey, I'm signing in, and they say, great, and whatever. And so then a box pops up. So you hit take the next texter, you get a texter, and a box pops up on your screen. And you're essentially texting with this person. It's not on your phone. You could do it on your phone, but I do it on my computer. And you're texting with this person, and it's all text-based.
Okay, so actually the reason I'm asking is because you mentioned something earlier, right before we started, about how this would count for practicum, but it actually won't count for practicum or internship because it's text only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are not allowed to allow students to get this kind of experience for practicum and internship. So this is great though for a volunteer experience to learn how to work with clients. But I just want to put that up front to everyone. A text only line will not count for practicum or internship. It'd have to be telehealth, like a phone call or Zoom or something like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I just happened to notice today that they do partner with some schools. So anyway, it doesn't meet our criteria. So that's good to know. All right. So their whole motto is meeting people where they are, essentially. And it's a nonprofit organization. It's open 24/7. And recently, I think about 6 months ago, it's bilingual. So they're really, really keen on recruiting crisis counselors who can speak Spanish as well as English. That's a big push for the hotline. Launched in 2013, and you can see they've trained over 55,000 volunteers and been involved in 7.5 million crisis conversations. And when the mental health when it went from that whatever number to 988, I guess it is now, there was a huge surge because they actually partner now with the government and with SAMHSA as well. And so we went from, there's normally, we try to not have a waiting line, but sometimes there's like 30 texters who are waiting. But when that first went online, the 988, I mean, it tripled the amount of people coming on to the text hotline. And it also changed the nature of a lot of the conversations we were having. The people were in much more distress than they had been, because even though it's a crisis hotline and it is for suicide prevention, a lot of the people that come on are just looking for someone to talk to. They're not always, they'll come in and they're in crisis, but they're not always, they're not always suicidal. So, you can see in 2021 engaged 1.3 million conversations. And over 17,000 of those were people who reached out in imminent danger of harming themselves or harming others. And you get a lot of people who are self-harming as well, not just suicidal, but also a lot of self-harm. And you have to talk to these folks, but you're trained. And, but it's a little scary at first. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you the truth, but you get used to it and you become calmer. And you also have a toolkit that you can work from. So their vision is empathetic world where no one feels alone. And that's very much, people come on there, they have no one to talk to. A lot of folks can't afford therapy, don't have a therapist. So they come to the crisis hotline looking for someone to talk to, but we're a short-term service. So, you're not really supposed to be on with them for longer than a half an hour. And sometimes it does go longer, and, that's just the way it is. So they're at the, you know, if you fill out an application, a lot of the questions that they ask you about is about empathy. Do you see yourself as empathetic, and why so? And, you know, they want you to demonstrate before you get on the hotline that is one of your values, and sort of the center of who you are. And one of the criteria is a letter of recommendation. So the letter of recommendation also has to talk about, you know, your empathetic skills and why they should take you on as a counselor. So they're a free service. It's 24/7. It's all text-based, and it's all volunteer-based. Although they do have peers and counselors and coaches, and I mean, it's supervisors, and there are professionals who are also working with you. So this is just a little bit about the folks, you know, that come online. So one of the things that was really shocking for me was you don't get a lot of adults, you know, because it's text-based. The majority of the folks that you're dealing with are young, teenagers. And I get kids on there who are 9 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, want to take their lives, you know, have things going on. And that was like, I think one of the biggest eye openers for me is just that it's not just teenagers or people in their 20s or their 30s, that there's kids on there that are super young. And that was, you know, pretty informative for me. So there's 53 million people in the US and 1 billion people globally experiencing mental illness annually. You get a lot of BIPOC youth who come online, but we do also refer out to like Trevor Project, and we're not specifically trained in that, but we do get a lot of young people from that, you know, from BIPOC. Suicide rates for young people rose 57% in the last decade, and during the rates increased significantly with the pandemic. You know, a lot of these kids who come on who want help are isolated and really don't have the same social networks that they might have before the pandemic. So 59% of Americans say they have a mental health condition, and less than half say they're getting any help. So like I said, you know, we get a lot of folks on there that may not be in crisis in terms of taking their lives or hurting someone else, but they need someone to talk to, and you're actually providing a huge service. You're taking them from crisis to calm. That's like a big part of what we do. And it's a 5-step process that you're trained in. That has really helped me a lot in my classes at Southwestern. You know, it's been a great experience. So some of these kids, they have school counselors. 82% of Gen Z want school and work to promote mental health. They're pretty sophisticated when they come online too. They work with school counselors. They're very aware of mental health. They know they're suffering. And some people actually come on with diagnoses, which is a little interesting when that happens. You don't get into that with them. Like, you don't even acknowledge it, because that's not what you're there for. You're not there to diagnose them. You're not there to give them a treatment plan. You're just there to help them get through this moment in their lives where they're, you know, in crisis, an urgent moment. Yeah, so you could see they have an urgent need for there's a huge amount of Latina adolescents attempting suicide, more than any other group of teenagers. Access to services is scarce. Only 5.5 give services in Spanish. So this is like I said, is a big priority for the hotline in recruitment. Only 5.5 psychologists in the US can provide services in Spanish, which is pretty shocking when you think about it. And 44 states saw a decline in availability of services in Spanish, despite growth in Hispanic populations across all states. And then teens, teen adolescents attempt suicide more than any group of teenagers. So that's just an overview of what it's all about and how the intervention works. There's 3 levels of support. There's the crisis counselor, which is what I do and what you would do if you actually decide to sign on. They do have mental health professionals on staff who are there with you on the platform, but also are working to design the programs and stay abreast of changes and needs within the mental health industry. And then they have this very sophisticated algorithm where they're able to determine those that are in serious crisis and get to those people within a minute of time. So they're not hanging out waiting on a waiting line like some other folks might be. They have to answer questions up front, and in the algorithm catches those people and moves them up to the beginning of the queue, if you like.
That's amazing, Jessica, that they have the technology to do that.
Yeah, Michelle, it's very, very sophisticated situation, and a lot of they are not a nonprofit, but I think they're getting a lot of money from the federal government and state governments, and also just donors who are very interested that realize that there's a huge problem, crisis, mental health crisis. So so the person will be on WhatsApp or Facebook or social media, or they can text in, through 988, and they come in and they get a screen that asks them like welcomes them and says like what's going on, and through that sort of initial intake, they're able to determine, the algorithm is able to determine sort of the people that are in the greatest crisis. And so then they can either go in Spanish, Espanol, or they can go in English. So they get, moved out again. So texters can't actually request. I've had a number of texters who say, oh, you're great, blah, blah, blah. Can I ask for you again? And it's like, no, actually you can't. It's a random queue of counselors. They can't actually ask for you by name, but we do have texters who want to work with a woman or want to work with a man, like that are gender, want to work with a certain gender, and we can do that. But outside of that, you can't actually request to talk to me again for the second time. So they determine the high risk texters, they move to the top of the queue, and they're on there, like I said, for less than a minute. Then you connect with a crisis counselor, and these are, we're trained to go through a system of getting, building a rapport. It's very much like the therapeutic relationship, and it's happening in real time, and it's happening very, very fast. And so you're establishing rapport, you're listening to them, you're finding out what's going on. And so someone may come on and say, I want to kill myself. And I'll say, okay, tell me what's going on. And in the course of that conversation and me listening to them, before we get into the risk assessment, which was something, if I feel like they're in imminent risk, if they tell me they have a plan and they have a means and they have a time, then a whole nother piece of the puzzle kicks in. But 90% of these folks, they'll say, I want to kill myself, or I'm going to self-harm. And I say, okay, tell me what's going on. And then they start telling me, and through that process, I might determine that they just have really bad anxiety, or something just happened and they're in crisis, and they have depression, or it's like I said, 90% of these folks are not really ready to take their lives, but they are in crisis. And that's what you're there for, is to take them, like I said, from this crisis state to a calm state, to resource them, and to make them, and to say to them, like, so what are you going to do tonight to take care of yourself? And they give you a plan, and then you say goodbye. And but they could call back 10 minutes later. That's what we're here for, 24/7. And we do have some people who, I had one woman a couple of months ago who had texted in 100 times, but that's what we're there for. We're not there to judge. We're there to just help them. So like it says, in less than 1% of conversations, the supervisor. So if you do the risk assessment and they say, I'm suicidal, and you say, okay, do you have a plan? And they say yes. And then you say, do you have means? And they say yes. And they tell you what it is. And then you say, well, when do you have a time? And if it's within 24 hours and they say, yeah, I'm waiting for my mom and dad to go out to the movies, I'm going to do it tonight. Then you push the help button for your supervisor, and a whole nother triage group of people come online, and it's all about determining whether or not that is exactly what's happening. And I've had a number of situations where they get to that point and they have the time, and I've actually been able to work with them to not so much change their mind, but at least for that, within that 24-hour period, get them to agree that with me that they won't take their lives, that they won't implement their plan. So it's a little hairy sometimes, but it's actually incredibly rewarding. You're literally helping people and saving their lives. So when it is life-threatening, the supervisor comes on, and if it's really bad, if they determine that it is an imminent risk, then they do involve the police, and they do first responders and mobile crisis units, depending on what state they live in. There's different criteria that happen. And you do have some texters who say, don't call the police, please don't do this, don't do that. And you're bound by ethics of the platform, and you're a mandated reporter. So it can get a little hairy. But your supervisor is there to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So you're not alone in these decisions that you're making. So that's pretty much it. And then just, so as part of your commitment, they give you 30 hours of training. And as part of that commitment, in return for that, you have to give them 200 hours of what I'm calling experience, which is really great. And it's, they ask for like a minimum of, 4 hours a week, but with school and everything, sometimes I can't do that. So they're very, very flexible, and then sometimes I do 7 hours, if I can, and some weeks I only do 1 hour because I have a lot of, homework at school and I can't do it. And it's just too much. So you set your own schedule, you sign up for repetitive shifts. And if you can't be there, then you just let your supervisor know what's going on. So, I'll show you where you sign up. So you sign up, and part of the application is you have to get a letter of recommendation. And at the time I wasn't at Southwestern, I was at my undergrad. And so one of my professors wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I did the training, and then you sign up for the shifts, and then then it's all go. And, you check in with your coach, your supervisors. I get emails once a week from my success coach. They look out for you. I get texter feedback, which is always really cool. I've had a lot of people, texters. There's a survey at the end, and they write in and they say, they don't know my name necessarily. Like, you can go in under your name, or you can have an alias or whatever, but I just go as Jess, and they'll write in and say, I saved their life, or I did this, or I listened to them at a time when they needed somebody. And it's always really cool to get texter feedback. And also my supervisors, they give you feedback and give you props, when you do a good job, and then they're there when they don't like what you're doing too. So, it's what's been great. And for me is like, it's really helped me. Like, I don't like so much to be told what to do, it's just one of those things, right? But as I'm preparing to go into practicum, I'm going to be working with a supervisor. So it's been great experience for me to learn to take supervision and kind of go, okay, you're right. I shouldn't have done that, and there's times when you have to try. I do trust my gut, and it is debatable, but you know what? I'm on their platform, and I have to adhere to their protocols and their training, and I'm not there to interpret anything. And so, I do. So I don't do it as often as I might have in the beginning, but And it's also really taught me to stay calm in an emergency situation. So as counselors, a lot of time, you know, our clients are going to come in and they're going to be in crisis, and you have to sit there and like, and well, not just sit there, but like on the text hotline, I have to remain calm. And it's gotten much easier as I become more experienced. And now what I find myself doing is I'm in a counseling skills class this term, and I'm actually implementing some of the things I'm learning, some of the interventions and some of the things that I'm learning in those classes. And it's actually really great to see how it works, how people respond in real time to the things that I'm learning in class. One of the big things for me is I've learned, you know, to stop giving advice. That was like, it's my thing. It's something that I fight against. And so I've really worked on that, and it helped me improve my listening skills tremendously. And the best thing of all is you're working with a wide variety of people of all shapes and sizes, men and women, boys and girls, you know, gender fluid, non-binary. I mean, it's like, it's all there. And you learn how to deal with all sorts of people in all different types of situations from all different economic and demographic backgrounds. And yeah, and so with that, I'll turn it over to you for questions. So I'll stop my share. And okay, let me just do the gallery view. All righty. So Cheryl, do you have questions, I see?
Yeah, I'd like to hear what the training is like. Like, was it on Zoom? Was it with other people? Is it workbook thing that you go through? Like what's the training?
So the training's all online, as you would imagine, because I think they also want to make sure that you have very good computer skills as well, you know, so it's all online, and it's, you do it in your own time. It's not on Zoom. There's no timeline per se. Like, I think if I remember correctly, they want you to finish within like a month's period. So that, because they want to get you on the hotline as quickly as possible. Right. But you work at your own speed, and it's different. Like, so there's one like the introduction, and then it's like, how do we work? And then how to do, you know, how to be an empathetic listener, and how to take a risk assessment. So there's like 7 or 8 different sections. And then you do like a little mini test at the end of each one, you know, to make sure that you've actually taken it in.
Is it like or is it like video? Or
there's some videos. So it's a mix of pre-recorded videos from trainers and workbook. But I think, now that I think of it, it is mostly like there's a training video, and then there's a series of questions. It's not hard. But, you know, then they give you a little bit of a test, and then, you know, and then you pass, and then you're on the hotline, you know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just hoping it was engaging and like, you know, interactive, and I like don't need more computer time. So that's why I was like, is it gonna be like in a class, or what does it actually look like?
Yeah, no, it's not in a class. It's your own, you go to your own rate, and it's videos, but it is engaging. I mean, you're learning really cool stuff. So it is engaging, and it goes quickly.
It sounds like what we would call in college terms, asynchronous and self-paced.
That's right. So yeah, go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I was wondering, so when you have to escalate to a higher tier, do you just pass the person off to them and then you don't hear from them again, or do you get to observe anything that happens at the higher tier? I'm just kind of curious, like what the next tier, you know, it seems like it'd be educational to witness something.
They don't actually leave you. You're there right in the mix. You're absolutely there in the mix. You are actually still communicating. What I mean, like, the tier is kind of invisible It's
Oh,
visible to you and to your supervisor, but it's invisible to the texter, right?
okay, cool.
So what they do is they come in and they're helping, they elevate it to this next tier, sort of behind the scenes, but
Right.
you're the one still talking to the texter through the entire process.
Okay, that's really
And-
cool.
And it's really cool. And you're still trying to get them to not take their life. So you're still working with them and trying to resource them and still getting them to tell you their story and still very much engaged through the entire process.
Awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So
John.
so like when you're at that higher tier, is there like two text boxes, like one with the person, one with the client and one with the supervisor?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Okay,
Exactly. So I'll hit help. Literally, there's like a help. And then the supervisor will come on and they read through your text, your just conversation that you've been having very quickly to figure out. And sometimes they'll say, okay, she says she's got a plan and she says she's got a time, but she did say this. Go back and re-explore that comment, to gather more information. So yeah, the minute you hit the help thing and it goes to that next level, a text box opens up with the supervisor and they're right there, like almost immediately to help you. So yeah, I highly advise it if you want to get experience, if you're interested in becoming a crisis counselor, or if you just want to get practical experience working with folks. It's been absolutely amazing. I mean, it is exhausting sometimes. It is emotionally draining sometimes. I'm not going to lie. Like when you have someone that, that I've had one or two people, I've only out of like 350 people, I've only really had two where it's gone to where the EMS, or the crisis, the mobile crisis folks are called in. And then it's a little scary, Katie, because you are taken out of the, and sometimes what's supposed to happen is they're supposed to come back and tell you what happened, but there's been a couple times where I don't know what happens. And then you're like, oh my God, what if they didn't get to that person on time? You know what I mean? You're only human. So I give myself, I give myself plenty of time. Like I do like Thursday night and then I do like Sunday night. I give my plenty of recovery time between my shifts. To kind of decompress. Yeah. Sean, go ahead.
and how long is a shift, and are you obligated to stay on for that 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is?
No, their whole thing is you can't drink out of you can't pour out of an empty cup. Like there is a lot of conversation and in the training about self-care. Like they do not want you to burn out. And if I get on there and I have a difficult texter, like, or it's, not difficult, but some like an emotionally like, oh my God, I can't believe that was insane. I'll just tell my supervisor, I'm sorry, I have to go. And they go, okay, so no, you're not they'd like you to do 4 hours a week, but, most of the time I'm on there for an hour and then I check out and then or maybe 2 hours at the most. And then I go back. I can't do 4 hours at a time. Personally, it's just too much, but you just say, hey, I'm here. And then I'm going now, and also there's a survey after each texter where you have to fill out like what was their, you're not diagnosing them, but it'll say anxiety, depression, relationships, self-harm. Like there's all these different categories because they're also trying to collect data that then they give to like, for their own use to see what percentage are coming in for different diagnoses, if you like, and part of that survey that you're filling out, it says at the bottom, how are you feeling? And there's like these like different smiley faces, and one smiley face is not smiling at all. And if you like click that not smiley face, then your supervisor will come in and say, I just saw you, are you okay? Like, so they're very much focused on self-care and that you take care of yourself. And then there's training, and these, Cheryl Ann, there's other trainings that are live on Zoom with groups of crisis counselors that are like refreshing your skills, new things that just happened. So when there's like a mass shooting or something, they'll call a training and everybody comes on and they'll do a skills refresh and they'll create fact sheets. And in the moment you're talking about things that are happening in real time in life. And more people have been coming on, crisis, climate change, those types of crises are more and more coming up in people's conversations, which is interesting. So anywho, if any more questions, or we could probably tie it up.
I don't have any questions, but I do just want to say, as someone who volunteered for a crisis hotline, so it was on the phone many years ago, the training that I received was so valuable coming into this program when I did in 2008, because I learned a lot of really basic skills that really gave me an edge over my cohort when I started practicum and started seeing clients. Because one of the things they made us do when we were practicing, because it was like live training and we practiced with each other, being the caller and the person on the other end taking the call. We had to basically, for the first 10 minutes, focus on getting the caller to just talk about their feelings. And we weren't allowed to jump into problem solving until they had explored their feelings. And for some people, that's really challenging because they want to jump into problem solving. And it's not necessarily helpful to do that. Another thing too that I learned were just some little things over the years that I now do all the time, not just if I'm sitting with clients, because I don't actually work with clients anymore, is not starting questions with the word why, because it implies judgment. And also what I found really helpful about the training is once I started practicum, I felt like I was more comfortable having those tough questions with people when they did start to indicate that they had some suicidal ideation. I wasn't afraid to just jump right in and ask the questions that need to be asked, because they do need to be asked.
Right.
And I'm sure they talk about that in your training with the text hotline. It's the same thing. Like you can't beat around the bush about it.
We have to be very direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got over that hurdle of that fear because I had to do it with some callers. And
Yeah.
so when I had my first real client in practicum, she had suicidal ideation. And I just jumped right in and asked the questions that I needed to ask. And I wasn't afraid. So I think that's where the training, I think, is super helpful. Even with a text hotline, it's the same skills you're going to learn.
Yeah. I've really had to learn to be more a lot of reflecting back. So I hear you're saying this, they teach you a lot in the training about listening and reflecting back to your clients. And I'm not allowed to really get into any risk assessment for the first 10 or 15 minutes. So you're on there for 10 or 15 minutes, really kind of finding out what's really going on with this person so you can resource them. So yeah, that's true though. We have to be very direct. Someone will come on and say, oh, well, I want to kill myself. And then then you're talking to them about it and they don't, it becomes obvious that it's something else that's really bothering them. I still have to go back and say, sometimes when you do have people that are breaking up with their boyfriends and they want there are some people that you're like, oh my God, seriously. But but I have to say, you said that you wanted to, kill yourself. Because sometimes when we break up with someone, we're having dark thoughts. Are you thinking about death or dying? And they'll say, no, I was, but I'm okay now. Or yes, I'm still going to, cut myself and get into the bathtub. And I did have one woman who was actually doing that was the scariest one so far. Yeah, that was really scary. I had actually had to go off the platform for like 3 weeks after that happened. Cause it was like I was kind of new. So yeah, your window of tolerance increases for sure. Um, but yeah. All righty. Well, if anybody wants to email me directly, I can send you a link to, to sign up for the, I can show you where the link is. But if you go to, crisishotline.org, you can find the application. And I don't, like I said, it's been a really rewarding, great experience. And now I have something to put on my resume when I'm going out looking for practicum, which I used it as a resume builder too.
And that is a great resume builder. So even though you can't necessarily use the experience for practicum and internship, it's a great thing to put on your resume, because coming into this, the only experience that you all may have would be working on a crisis hotline that's like directly applicable, as opposed to doing other things that are sort of related to this field. We kind of have to stretch it like, well, I've worked with kids.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that you have experience doing, therapeutic.
And they'll let you, just sorry to cut you off, Michelle. They'll also write you a letter of recommendation once you've finished the 200 hours. They will,
I could get your foot in the door for an internship. Definitely.
Yeah.
Jessica, would you go ahead and just put the link in the chat? So if anybody wants to grab it right
sure.
now,
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording, because I think we captured everything we need to.